Okay, good morning guys. I say good morning because it's about 9 a.m. But anyway, I've got this 2012 Jeep Patriot over here. Let's go check it out. This Jeep, I've already looked at it and it needs a fuel pump. And I'm gonna explain to you guys how I know that. So let's get in here and we'll see what it's doing. So here we are in the Jeep. It's got about 178,000 miles, which for a Jeep Patriot is quite a lot. But the issue here, let me fire it up and I will show you what it's doing here. Now you may be saying, hey, the Jeep starts and runs, so how can you say it needs a fuel pump? Normally, when a car needs a fuel pump, it just quits running and it won't start, right? Well, no, not in this case. So this thing actually, the problem with it was a check engine light that would come on, and then it would get that little red lightning bolt symbol, which is that one right there. That little light would come on. The car would basically go into limp mode, and you couldn't accelerate, you couldn't drive it, you just had to pull over and restart the car. And now the reason that this is happening, and I cleared the check engine light, so it's not on right now, but it was throwing a code running lean. So let me get a scan tool on it and show you guys the information. Okay, so I've got the scan tool hooked up to it, and this is the code that it's throwing right now, pending code PO171 fuel system bank 1 to lean. Now the reason that the check engine light and also that red lightning bolt symbol is coming on, and the reason it's going to limp mode is because of this lean code. So something you got to know about Chrysler and Jeep vehicles, Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, when they run lean for too long, get that lightning bolt symbol and the car will go into limp mode. That's just how they're made. So a lot of people think that lightning bolt symbol is an issue with the throttle body, which it can be, but also you'll get it for running lean for too long. Okay, now let me briefly explain something to you guys about a lean condition. So it means basically one of two things. Either the car's getting too much air or it's not getting enough fuel. Now how it would be getting too much air would be, of course, a vacuum leak, right? You got a vacuum hose that's broken, intake gasket that's leaking, something like that, causing it to get unmetered air into the engine. And the second reason would be you're not getting enough fuel. Could be a weak fuel pump, clogged fuel injector, something like that. Now really with the lean condition, there are so many things that could cause it, so many different things. And a lot of people get tripped up with how to diagnose it, because it's like, where do you start? Do you start by checking for vacuum leaks? Do you start by checking fuel? What do you do? So I'm gonna make things kind of a little bit easier for you guys. You'll need a scan tool, but if you have even just a basic cheap scan tool, you'll be able to get some data that you need to make an accurate diagnosis and get the car fixed quickly without wasting a lot of time. So let's go in the vehicle with the scan tool. Let's road test it. Let's get this thing diagnosed accurately. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how to read data on the scan tool to get an accurate diagnosis of kind of a direction to go to get this lean condition fixed. So using a scan tool, this is the one I'm using here. You're going to want to read the data stream. So you're going to want to go to live data. You're going to want to look at really the long-term fuel trim. It'll be this one here. And let's go ahead and pull up the short-term fuel trim as well. Really, these are all I need to see right now. Okay, the car is off. Let me go ahead and start it. Now the car is cold right now, so really the long-term fuel trim is not going to change too much until the car warms up. So let me get the car a little bit warmer and then we'll go for a test drive. But 31%, that's very lean. What this means is that the car is adding 31% more fuel than normal to try to balance the air-fuel mix out. It's either getting too much air or not enough fuel, so it's trying to add more fuel to balance it out. So it's definitely a lean condition. And this is step one, guys. When you get a lean code, you want to verify the lean condition. Don't just go off of a code. You want to actually look at some data and see, is the car actually running lean or not? So I got the coolant temperature on here now, so I'm just going to let the car warm up a little bit more and then we'll go drive it. Okay, so we're warmed up now enough to where we can actually drive it and get some good data. The reason you want it warmed up is because you need the vehicle to be in closed loop. When you first start it up, it's open loop. And as you can see, there goes our check engine light. Here's what we want to do. We want to drive this thing. Let me take the coolant temp off. Okay, here we go. So we want to drive this thing, and this is what we're looking for here. We're looking mainly at the long-term fuel trim. When you drive this car down the road and you're accelerating, if the fuel trim numbers go down towards zero, you got a vacuum leak. Now, when you're accelerating, if the fuel trim numbers continue to go higher, in other words, it's going more lean, then you got a fuel problem. It's starving for fuel, because when demand for fuel is the greatest, it's running more lean. It can't get enough fuel. Sometimes it could be that the mass airflow is dirty too if the numbers keep going higher, but this engine doesn't actually have a mass airflow sensor. It's got a map sensor. So let's drive it. Okay, so I'll try to show you guys what I'm doing here. I'm going down the road. I'm I'm gonna let off the throttle, 23%. Let me get back on the throttle, 33%. So I'm gonna get off the throttle and it goes down to 23%. Let me get back on the gas. And as I'm accelerating, it's going more lean back to 33%. Now I'm off the gas again. So what I'm looking for here, guys, is a fuel issue. If this was some kind of a vacuum leak, then the more I accelerate, those fuel trim numbers would go down closer to 0. The more I accelerate, the leaner it becomes. And like I mentioned before, that's either because it's starving for fuel, or it could be a dirty mass airflow sensor, which this car doesn't have a mass airflow sensor. So I'm basically looking for a fuel problem here. Okay, so I'm back at the shop, and because I know at this point that I'm chasing a fuel issue, what I want to do first of all is check the fuel pressure. That's the most likely cause and the simplest thing to do. So on this Jeep Patriot, fuel line goes right here into the fuel rail. It's got a green retaining clip. So all I have to do is basically depress the tabs, push the clip out the bottom, and then slide the fuel line out. Now be careful when you do this. I would wear gloves and keep your face away from the fuel line so you don't get sprayed. You pull this line off and there's still fuel pressure in the system. So let's pull this line off. Now I got a fuel pressure gauge. I'm gonna hook up to it and I'm gonna measure the fuel pressure. Okay, so I got my adapter here. So I'm going to get this connected to the fuel rail. I'm gonna get the other side of it connected here with the clip back in. Now right here, I'll put my fuel pressure gauge. So let's connect right here, fuel gauge. Okay, so we're all hooked up, ready to go. So I've looked up, and the spec for this car on this 2012 Jeep Patriot with the 2.0, the fuel pressure needs to be right around 58 PSI running. So it can be 58 PSI plus or minus about 5 PSI, but we want to be right around 58. So let's start up the car and let's see what we got. Make sure too, when you do this, that you're connected well, that there's no fuel leaks or anything like that. But check this out, running, we're only at 30 PSI. That is way too low. We should be up around 58. So right there, that already tells me I know the fuel pump is weak and going out. So this thing's gonna need a fuel pump. Now, could the fuel pressure be low because there's some kind of a restriction in the fuel system and this and that? Sure, it's possible. But 99% of the time, guys, when you see this, that fuel pump is weak and going out. So I already know at this point we need to put a fuel pump in it. And that's why we're running lean. The more you rev this thing up, it's starving for fuel. It can't get enough fuel. So the car tries to add more and more fuel. It tries to keep the injectors open for longer to compensate, to try to get more fuel in the system, but it just can't get enough fuel. So let's get a fuel pump in this thing. And then the car should be fixed after that. Now the fuel pump is under the back seat in the car, so I'm gonna go back there. But before I do that, let me go ahead and release the fuel pressure. Just gotta hit that little black button on the side of my gauge, release all the fuel pressure. I definitely don't want to be working inside the car and then, you know, have pressure in the line and have fuel get sprayed all on the inside of the car. Another little word of caution before we get in there and start ripping out the fuel pump. Let's go ahead and disconnect the battery. Because remember, we're dealing with fuel here, guys. We don't want any electrical going through this car, creating a spark or anything that's gonna light you up on fire. We don't want that happening. So let's disconnect the negative battery cable. You can never be too careful when working around fuel. All right, now let's go inside. Okay, now to get this rear seat out to where we can get to the fuel pump, if you'll notice here on either side, there are these big old bolts that hold the seat in place. You'll need a T55 socket to get these bolts out. That's a pretty big size socket here. So there's one here, and then on the other side, there's another one. So just get these two bolts out, and then we'll be able to get the seat cushion out. I usually just break them loose with a breaker bar like this, and then I go in with the drill and finish taking them out all the way. And there's your bolts right there. Now this other one down here, I've already broken it loose. Get this one out. At this point, the back seat just kind of lift up and it'll pop out. So you got to pop it out from both sides. Just lift up with your hand. Let's go over here to the passenger side. Kind of got to use some force. Pop it out. Okay, once you have the seat cushion removed, then this little insulation, you got to lift up on it. And there's your access cover. Just take this whole thing out of the way. Now you'll notice there's two access covers, and that is because I believe this is a front wheel drive only, but I believe on the all-wheel drive models, they have two fuel pumps, I believe. There's a pump there that just pumps fuel from that side of the tank over to this side of the tank, and then the pump here pumps the gas to the engine. Well, anyway, because on the all-wheel drive model, they have to make the gas tank like kind of a saddle shape, so that way the drive shaft can go in the middle of it. So let's kind of take a little screwdriver and let's pop off this cover here. And there is the fuel pump down there. for fun, let's take this one off and see if there's anything there. I don't think that there's anything here on the front wheel drive models like this one, but let's see. And yep, nothing there. But anyway, even if yours is the all-wheel drive model and there's 2 fuel pumps, the one that you're worried about is the one over here on the driver's side, because that's the one that pumps the fuel to the engine. Okay, now very important before we just go ripping this stuff apart, you see all this dirt, all this dust. So we're gonna wanna clean that up as much as we can, because when we take this off, we don't want anything falling in the fuel tank. So I'm just gonna take some compressed air. I'm gonna be careful to try not to get the inside of the car dirty or anything like that, but I'm gonna get some compressed air, kind of blow it, wipe some of this dirt off, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so I've cleaned all the loose dirt and stuff. Obviously, I'm not trying to spit shine this thing, but then we're gonna get this connector off. We're gonna release the little tab here, pull the connector out of the way. Okay, now the main fuel line, it's got this blue retaining ring. Here, you can show that. I don't know if you can see it, but you just gotta kind of pinch on this. And once again, make sure the fuel pressure is released before you do this, but pinch on the little blue tab, kind of push forward, pull, pinch the tab, and then pull back. You're gonna have a little bit of fuel spill out. That's kind of unavoidable. At this point, we're gonna need to get this locking ring out. That way we can actually pull out the fuel pump. All right, so to get this locking ring out, you're gonna need a tool like this. There you go. So I'll try to put a link to where you guys can find something like this. But basically what you need to do is you need to fit the tool in there, in the little slots. And you need to take a 1/2 inch breaker bar. And you need to give it a good whack, and you need to break this thing free. Try to. Like so. Pull the tool out, pull out the retaining ring, and then from there we'll be able to get the fuel pump out. So maybe a little stuck, so you may have to kind of get a screwdriver in there or something, or just pull on it maybe. And I don't even remember, I don't remember seeing how much fuel was in this thing, so hopefully it's not all the way full. Now we gotta pull this little baby out. And this tank is full. It's like all the way full to the top, man. Isn't that always what happens when you do a fuel pump, man? It's always full. I'm gonna try to let as much of this drain as I can, and then gotta pull it out, let it drain for a minute. Man, this thing's like all the way full. Crazy, man. Okay, I'll get the float out, this thing out of the vehicle. And this O-ring, always change that. It should come with the new fuel pump, but if it doesn't, definitely replace this. Okay, now here's the deal with these fuel pumps. So I normally on a vehicle, I recommend putting an OEM original equipment fuel pump in the car. However, this customer, they just want to get this thing fixed so that they can sell it, basically. So I've got this precision fuel pump that I got from O'Reilly's. Here's the pump, and there's the O-ring down there, so it comes with all that. So this is the fuel pump I'm going to use, and it should be just fine, so I'm not worried about it. So let me take this thing over and we'll get it put in. Before we pop in this new fuel pump, and I've kind of already done this, but take a little rag or paper towel and wipe where the O-ring goes. Wipe it down, because you don't want any dirt interfering with your seal on the O-ring. So just wipe all that down, get it clean. That way your O-ring makes a good seal and you don't have a fuel leak. So the O-ring goes first. After cleaning off on the top of the fuel tank where it goes, then the O-ring goes next. Then the fuel pump. So let's get our float in there first. Just fish it in there. Get this the same way that we took it off here, about like that. So you see that little kind of tab sticking out of the fuel pump. It's supposed to fit in between. On the fuel tank, it's got a little slot where it fits into, so that way you put it back exactly the same way that you took it off. The little locking ring goes in, so kind of hold down on the fuel pump. And once we got that seated on there, we'll need our tool again. Fit our tool on here. Let's get it tightened. So you want the locking ring to be fully seated, so basically that little notch right there on the locking ring has to fit about right there with the fuel tank, and then you'll be fully seated. There you go, you got it. Get my little tool out. And you see where it is now, so we're fully seated now, so we're good to go. So now at this point, pop this little guy off, protective cover. And it looks like I'll need to recycle my blue retainer from the other fuel pump. So here's my little blue retainer that I had to recycle. So let me get that put back into the fuel line here, like so. Now, let's reconnect this little guy. Clicks into place nicely, and then we got to get our connector plug back in. Just push it down, click, and we're good. So now at this point, what we want to do is we're going to fire up the car, well, reconnect the battery, of course, fire up the car, and leave everything like this while we start it up. That way we can verify that there's no fuel leaking anywhere around here. Once we verify that, put all the seats back together, and then we're good to go. Okay, so battery's reconnected. Let's fire this thing up and see what happens. Fires right up. And as you can see over here, we don't have any fuel spraying out. Yeah, no fuel spraying out or anything like that, so we're good. Let's come over here to the engine, and hey, check it out. I told you guys 58 PSI, didn't I? And we're at 60 PSI, 58 plus or minus 5. So guys, we're good to go. Check this out. We have good fuel pressure now. Before we were at 30, now we're right at about 58 where we're supposed to be. So we've got the problem fixed. Now let's go get everything back together and let's look on the scan tool and verify that the lean condition is no longer present. So at this point, I'm just going to put everything back together. I'm going to kind of skip over some of this because it's a little bit redundant, but get that cover popped in, get that insulation piece back over here and get the seat on, and then we're golden, and then we'll go drive it. So I got everything back together, and check out our numbers now, guys. Long-term fuel trim is basically at 0.2%. So we were at, about anywhere from 25 to 33%. But we are not, the computer is not trying to add more fuel than normal to offset a lean condition. So we're good now. Kind of rev it up, 0%. So this thing's not running lean at all, guys. This thing is definitely fixed. I'll go drive it and just see how it does going down the road. Going down the road, guys, we're kind of back to where the same conditions as before, so I'm going to let off the gas. 0% on the long term. I'm going to give it gas. 0% on the long term. Obviously, there's some fluctuations in the short term, especially now that the computer's got to relearn what it's learned before. So, but yeah, this thing is fixed, guys. You can see the difference. That is it for this one, guys. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something. We'll see you next time.